My name is Scott Challoner, and this is the Leaders Council podcast for the people who run the country and the people who keep the country running. You join us on what is a bleak and cold winter morning here in the capital, but joining us on the podcast today to hopefully add a little bit of warmth and brightness to affairs are two guests. Firstly, Cheryl Simpson MBE, CEO of the Space4Autism charity, and secondly, Kate Blackmore, who is a trainer, counsellor, speaker, women and girls mental health advocate, and founder of the charity Motherwell Cheshire. Welcome both of you, and by all means, thank you so much for joining us on today's show. It's an immense pleasure.
Hi.
Hi, both of you. Real pleasure joining you, to have you both joining us on the show, as I say. Just to sort of contextualise for those regular listeners that might not be too familiar with the both of you, I think it will be helpful just to provide a brief overview of what it is that you both do. Starting with yourself, Cheryl, first and foremost, could you sum up initially what Space4Autism seeks to do, please?
As a co-founder of Space4Autism, we set up in 2005. I've got two sons with autism. Diagnosed, there was absolutely no support really for parents area. Of parents was 16 years ago, and now we support over 5,000 individuals, and that includes siblings, people with autism themselves, and adults. By way of social clubs, we do a lot of training, and we're based over in Macclesfield in Cheshire. Really serve East Cheshire, but people do come from all over. A very lot of Space4Autism.
Yeah, fantastic. And Kate, also yourself, what is it that the Motherwell organisation specialises in? I understand you're very much involved with sort of providing services for women by promoting positive mental health, positive well-being, and providing a range of services around that side of things.
Yeah, so I founded the charity in 2015, originally to support the mental health and well-being of mums, in particular mums at risk of child removal due to their own mental health. And over the years, we've evolved now to be a women and girls mental health service. So we work with girls from 13 right up with no upper age. We offer counselling, mentoring, social prescribing activities. And then we also do some campaigning on social media and plan events as well. And we're based in Crewe, which is Cheshire East of Cheshire, and also Winsford in Cheshire West and all surrounding areas.
So two neighbouring organisations there for sure. And International Women's Day is, of course, upon us in March, the upcoming month. And this is essentially going to be the crux of what we're talking about today, the state of where we are with women's safety. And I understand both of you are part of a women's working group, which you, Kate, happen to head up, of course. Could you just sort of expand on what the purpose of that women's action group actually is?
Yes, so before Christmas, well, probably in the summer of last year, I set up Cheshire Women's Collaboration, and it was built on the foundations of all the great things that are going on in Cheshire that support women in many different ways: practical support, financial support, well-being. And then the 4 subcommittees from the collaboration: the women in sport, women in skills, education and employment, women with mental health and physical health, and then lastly, women's safety.
Now, particularly women's safety, that is an incredibly hot topic at the moment. Obviously, with all of the lockdowns that took place during the sort of the peaks of the COVID-19 pandemic, there were very, very grave concerns about women being trapped at home with abusive partners, and we may only be just about to start to see the true impact of that on mental health and well-being, and also physical well-being, now that we're sort of coming out of the pandemic. And of course, those harrowing news headlines involving the abuse of Harriet Robson by Manchester United footballer Mason Greenwood has thrust that issue really back into the national headlines again. So women's safety is in a very precarious place at the moment. What are your thoughts on the issue as a whole, and how is it that your initiatives are trying to sort of address the issue?
Well, I think there's two strands to it, really. There's a wider social issue that we alone can't influence, but we can work with local and national organisations and local councillors and MPs to look at that, in terms of how people view it in the home, how people view it in society. But also our collaboration is to look at what's already going on in Cheshire, that we can support each other in promoting that. We can signpost the women and girls that we support into some of them initiatives as well. So it's very much a here and now issue as well as a wider issue to influence change.
Since the lockdown restrictions were eased especially, have you found that sort of higher volumes of women have started to come to you to make use of your services because of things that have been going on within the family home?
I wouldn't say exactly just for women's safety, if I'm honest, but I think it's all the other things in society that have definitely impacted them. For young women, it's around body image. A lot of the time, unfortunately, is through what males have said to them and explained to them. I think what social media, what they're accessing, influencers, I think have got a lot to answer for in terms of, how they portray a healthy lifestyle isn't always healthy for young people. But absolutely in terms of, being stuck in a home and domestic abuse. I mean, we don't tend to work with we do counselling for domestic abuse, but practically there's another charity in Cheshire that would do that. But it's a trickle effect of lockdown that come out in all different shapes and sizes, really. Relationship breakdowns with young people that have become quite unhealthy as well.
Yeah, you make a very, very important point. Yeah. Yeah, do go on.
It found during the pandemic and the lockdowns, we did a crisis line, and that kind of turned into a lot of abusers coming in. A lot of females were phoning us up of all ages, but an awful lot of parents, that were stuck at home. And as Kate just said, we do have a fantastic charity in this area, Cheshire Without Abuse. And I know we certainly made use of that for a lot of our members, that wasn't something that we expected to happen on our crisis line. We thought people would be phoning us, about autism. Domestic abuse really shot up around where we are, definitely.
And when we talk about sort of what sort of wider society needs to do to address the issue, it's going to take a lot of action, isn't it? Because we're seeing especially a lot of attitudes towards women that they need to be a certain way in terms of sort of their body shape. There's this sort of almost an excuse for abusers with people suggesting that women shouldn't go out after a certain time, they shouldn't be walking alone after dark, they shouldn't go out dressed a certain way because it's seen as provocative and they're just asking to be abused. But why should that be the case? I mean, rather than this protecting your daughter's mentality, should it not be about educating your sons to an extent?
Yeah, and we get picked up on that
earlier.
a lot.
Saying Kate earlier was, more education in schools.
Yeah.
Highlighted in schools, not just a tick box.
Yeah, and I think that we do domestic abuse. I'm certainly not minimising, but it isn't the only women's safety issue. We work with young people and even young women, in their 30s. Consent is an absolutely huge issue. They're not sure. Consent has definitely lost its meaning over, I would say, over the last 15 years. I mean, I'm a counsellor outside of Motherwell, as in the therapeutic sense. And I still can't believe how many females are not sure where their right is to say no, with their own husbands, in long-term partners, the fear of what's going to be said at school for younger people. Consent just needs to go back into schools. And obviously there's a big campaign on sexism in schools. And I think we need to be challenging what we hear. Teachers need to be challenging. Teachers need to be careful what they're saying in terms of, sexist comments. And it is an issue because, girls can sometimes be blamed, as you said. And we do forget that the issue lies a lot of the time with the males in terms of what their comments are, what they feel is acceptable, what they've heard their parents say, that and ultimately what might have been acceptable years ago absolutely isn't now, and there's a big piece of work that needs to be done around that times have changed. Wolf whistling, pinching somebody's bottom is just not acceptable now and can be really threatening.
And something that really struck me again about that story with Mason Greenwood in the headlines was that people were responding saying that it's like, if two people are in a relationship, I mean, why is consent a problem? But I don't understand where that's come from. I mean, you can have two people who are married, who are in a relationship, and consent can still not be given. So that is another one of those perceptions, isn't it? An example of that that's sort of come about from somewhere and needs to be addressed, because it's wrong to think that consent doesn't apply even in committed relationships and marriages.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've got two sons, one's 9, one's 13, who, are Man United supporters, and I was absolutely mortified that we had to sit down and say, don't read what you're finding out about him, and he's not acceptable. He's done some really bad things, but we do a big campaign about positive role models in the charity, and these are young boys' role models who think it's absolutely acceptable to talk to a female like that. And again, society sometimes is to blame because the Football Association does not, obviously has not played, but they don't act appropriately sometimes to really, give out that this is not acceptable and we will not tolerate it. And like my son said, it's a shame because he was a good footballer.
Pedestal.
Yeah.
Such a pedestal. Everyone's sycophant around them. Yes, is the word that they hear.
Yeah.
Behave like that. I mean, he was at United from the age of 7. In that bubble. Was he actually taught to be?
Yeah.
Because we're the same. We're United in this house, Kate. And my son was, he's nearly 22. Stated, that upcoming fantastic player. Like you said, have the club, are they going to actually do anything? It'll go to court, yes. People need to come out. These clubs need to come out, don't they?
Yeah, definitely.
To these young lads that are watching them. Absolutely.
Goes to show, doesn't it, that there's an issue with education there again. He's sort of been exposed to a culture, hasn't he, where he's had the world at his feet, and he seems to clearly think that he's above the law with certain things, and that's certainly one of those conceptions that needs to be challenged. And just moving away from sort of consent and domestic abuse for a moment and talking about sort of the expectations being placed on women as well from a social perspective, self-harm is on the rise, and I think it's predominantly within a group of women that feel that they do not conform to what society expects them to look like. Some may obviously have issues with sort of their weight, for instance, and they're being damaged because they feel that they should be thinner for one reason or another. That's another thing that's also an incredibly important topic to cover for women's safety, isn't it? And another conception that should be challenged. Why are we not seeing people as perfect for the way that they are? It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you just used a really, really key word there about culture and, influencers and all the editing that is allowed to go on in terms of magazine covers. And then when a woman hasn't been edited, it's like a massive thing. And it just shows that when that is not the norm, whereas actually they shouldn't be edited and that should be the norm. All the pictures that go on Instagram and they're paid to promote this and paid to promote that. I think this is a whole culture that no charity alone can change. It has to be gone through with legislation that, people should be, this is what she looked like. And if they want to edit her and, airbrush her, make sure that's absolutely aware, because young people will look at them as, their role models, unfortunately. And they have to be shown to be responsible. If they are role models for young teens, they have to be responsible, and I think a lot of them aren't.
It is. Yeah. The big one. I was watching just a programme the other day, about Instagram and the airbrushing and the filters, and absolutely horrific pictures when it showed these girls as how they are, without being filtered, and then pictures of them airbrushed. And for younger children, younger females, they wouldn't even know that they've been airbrushed. Look like, and then they strive to look like that.
Yeah, and for us new mums as well. You have new mums on telly, don't you? And I always say to the mums when I'm counselling, they've had a personal trainer, they've got a nanny, they've got that side, they have a chef. you can't compare your life to theirs and try to look like them. And, and magazines will say,
compare.
Yeah.
Compare. I do it sometimes myself. I'll see these fantastic looking women. How have they done that?
Yeah.
Me. Hey, you shouldn't be feeling like that.
And it is a dripping tap, in it, for every. And I know some of this can happen to males as well, but when it's everywhere, isn't it? So for anybody, it will influence. No matter how confident you feel about yourself, it will ultimately, when you've seen it day in, day out, have an impact on everybody.
Mm-hmm. It sort of sets impossible standards,
to the phones,
doesn't it?
Aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, aspiring to be like celebrities, airbrush celebrities.
Instagram could put, when something has been airbrushed or filtered, that it is on there. Has been filtered. It needs to be on there.
Yeah, social media does have a lot to answer for in the entire situation, doesn't it? Because as well as when we're in a society where people aspire to be like celebrities and they're setting themselves impossible standards to compare themselves to, it's not just in magazines and it's not just on TV anymore. I mean, it's right in the palm of your hand when it's all over social media and all over social media outlets, isn't it? And obviously influencer culture as well has a huge part to play in setting those impossible standards and sort of putting young women in this position. So social media does have a lot to answer for, and there are steps that it needs to take to do that. I think Instagram certainly did talk about the potential of sort of setting like a little bit of a warning as to when certain photos have been edited or filtered, but I think this is something that kind of needs to be implemented across the board and that the social networks seriously need to be looking at.
Saying, don't they, they're going to make Facebook and all those social medias do something, but they're not.
Yeah.
If anything, it's getting worse because they're putting more filters onto your phones. You can do more now on your phones than you could ever do before.
Yeah, they're almost becoming too big for anybody to challenge them. Because they're not just, our local government. It's a worldwide social media platform, and it's going to take a lot to do that. And unfortunately, it will only come. And I also do feel sorry for schools in this. This is not a school issue. They play a big part in it. It is a parent issue. It is, having the right conversations with our, males, our sons and our daughters as well. But I think a lot just get put. All my friends are head teachers, and I just think they're almost producing a lifestyle for children at school as well as educating them. There's so much that has to be delivered through schools, but parents do need to take responsibility as well. And then I know that goes down to the nanny state kind of issue that a lot of people don't agree with. So it's difficult, very difficult.
Yeah, because it's taking...
Parents, haven't you, Kate?
Yeah.
The parents.
Yeah. And be responsible. And I know that's difficult when it comes to online. My children can definitely navigate. I have no idea with TikTok or Snapchat, never been on it, wouldn't know. So sometimes we're on a back foot of what they're being exposed to because we just don't know what we can put in place for them.
I think internet safeguarding is now going beyond just making sure that children aren't talking to strangers online now, isn't it? It's about the content, this particularly influencer content that they're being exposed to, because as we've talked about, they're setting themselves impossible standards by being exposed to sort of these filtered videos of celebrities, trying to, of course, be like them, aspiring to be like them, and it's simply not going to happen. And we need to be very, very careful about internet safeguarding moving forward. And again, I think perhaps legislation, as we've talked about, could have a role to play in that.
That's our when we're on the social club. They're not allowed to bring their phones in. That can. We let the youth group, because they're actually hooked to their phones, more time checking what they're looking at on their phones, the activity that they're there for. So we said, the only time they can take their phone out of the pocket is if they get a call from mum or dad, or if they need to make a phone call. Sit on their phones and us trying to manage that. Cool. Within the club.
Yeah.
In the clubs, we have no control of that. Or anything within the clubs on the phone.
And it's getting them to recognise it, isn't it? We've just been working with some young girls in a school, and they've all joined this WhatsApp group, and then this man's joined it and got them to send inappropriate pictures to him, and and it's like, who let that man join the group? But, that the education wasn't there for them to recognise that you shouldn't be letting people join a private WhatsApp group, and and it's really impacted the mental health of these girls. They feel exposed, they feel frightened when they go out because they don't know who this person is. And unfortunately, these people will find ways and means. And I know some of the girls will say, "Oh, they were only joking," and I think that's the culture as well. People don't understand that flashing or a rude picture can have massive impact on somebody that's perhaps quite anxious or low self-esteem already, and then it gets brushed off. Oh, it was only a joke. I didn't understand it would have that impact. I thought they'd find it funny, and that's when it comes to that culture that it's absolutely zero tolerance. I think we do need to go down that line a bit more. That it's no excuses.
And I'm sure you'll do it in your charity, Kate. It is zero tolerance.
Yeah. I think that goes really, when you read the messages that the policeman was sending around Sarah Everard, everybody else was laughing at it on the WhatsApp group, and it's going to take a lot for other males to say, that's not appropriate. And you might find it funny, but it isn't appropriate talking about somebody like that. I mean, some of them messages have come out that the police have said are really, really awful, and nobody has been able to challenge, and I think they need support to challenge that, because
it's a young lad.
It's alarm bells, isn't it?
Parapet. Yeah. If they put their head above the parapet, then they're friends. Really strong to do that.
Yeah, it's shocking, isn't it?
They need the support, don't they? And they need somebody to say, no, you're right, this isn't right. And I just wonder who would, if you reported it to the police, would they laugh? If you reported it to a leader in a school, would they say, well, I think they were only joking, it's only words? But somebody the other day was on telly saying, when it starts at low level, it is going on to show actually later on, they have committed rape or a serious sexual assault. We seem to always be dealing with things just a little bit, well, not a little bit, a lot too late. When women are being murdered, that's far too late.
Yeah, it is shocking, isn't it, to see that attitude, that kind of culture has infiltrated the police force, and so serious it's been seen as in the Metropolitan Police that the Commissioner, of course, Dame Cressida Dick, has lost her job because of it just last week. And obviously that now whoever succeeds her is going to try and have to kind of spearhead that positive change to move away from those attitudes. But it is worrying. I think you're absolutely right. And I think also when it comes to the internet again, moving away from social media, does the ease of access to sort of pornographic content, particularly which depicts sort of graphic treatment of women, does that also have a lot to answer for in maybe some of the attitudes and the behaviour that are displayed towards women as well, do you feel?
But I would definitely say so. I know somebody recently who kind of related to pornography, but she'd messaged quite a long-term boyfriend to say that she likes rough sex, and he went on to seriously sexually assault her. This is 2 years ago, and the police said you shouldn't have sent that text. Where does that blame sit then? There's a whole difference, isn't there? And I think people do relate that to pornography. There is difference between rough sex and a sexual assault, but people aren't seeing that. There's no lie in there at all.
I suppose that brings consent. That brings consent back into question as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
These young kids are on, the gaming culture.
Yeah.
Luckily, my son, he likes Minecraft, and that's kind of all we get.
Yeah.
Horrendous. Treating the women and the way they can dress the women on these games.
Yeah, and I think there is a game where some of them are prostitutes, aren't they, or sex workers, I think. And also mine is around like some of the song lyrics as well, extremely derogatory, relating to pornography. And then that just becomes a norm when we're accepting that a song in the charts is talking about it, doesn't it?
I mean, yeah, GTA, some of the songs on there.
Yeah.
Horrific. You just listen to that.
From
the game. Listening to it.
It's
It's the worst, and somebody needs to, somebody which can give legislation, an MP needs to absolutely look at this. But unfortunately, like I say, it's not just an issue in Great Britain. Some of these rappers are from America, and they can come over and sing their songs, and it's just not acceptable. But I don't think anybody understands the impact it can have on vulnerable people. And then it doesn't necessarily need to be young people. It's having an impact on vulnerable people that think it's okay to be like that and treat women like that.
It is staggering, isn't it? And women aren't always in a position to sort of get out of these situations that they're in, are they? I mean, especially when they're in sort of, let's say, an abusive relationship, for instance, financial pressures could mean that they essentially feel trapped within the situation that they're in, and that's an incredible worry. So there needs to be a lot more sort of intervention, not just on the sort of education side of things and more tight regulation of what young people are exposed to in terms of songs, in terms of sort of video game content, but also there needs to be sort of more help available to women who find themselves in crisis, and there need to be more options for them to sort of get out of situations like this when they find themselves rooted in them.
Yeah, one of the things we've looked at in the collaboration is the, doormen and door people. And I spoke to an ex-doorman, and he was explaining about it's quite rigorous training, but it's an hour on vulnerable people, and that's vulnerable people, not, women and things like that. And since just before Christmas, so since November, I've known of 3 people who, mainly because they know the work that we're doing at the moment, have come forward and said that they were assaulted in a nightclub, and 2 of them, the doormen, just stood around and watched. And then the third one was asked, why did you not report it to the doorman? He said, well, they're all mates of them, they're in on it. That is scary. What are they there for if they're not there to keep people safe? And that's something I'm really exploring at the moment, to get them get better training, and to understand the signs, and to, again, a culture in that club, it is not acceptable. I mean, we know spiking is going through the roof at the moment. And, it does need to be challenged at door level when people are entering. And then when people are coming to them, not just worrying about how much drink's being sold that night and what profit the bar and club's making, but people are safe when they're in there.
Yeah, it's especially worrying, isn't it?
Kate, on one of her calls, we've got a young lady that works for us. She's absolutely beautiful. And I mean, at the age I am, I still went to a club with her, and I was absolutely horrified, at the lack of awareness from everybody, really, in that club. I mean, drinks were just, groups of girls leaving the drinks on a table and then going off dancing, and I was like the mother hen, going like, you mustn't leave your drinks. So I was like standing with them, but yeah, even though it's out there, that you shouldn't leave your drinks because of the spiking, they're not doing it. There's not enough awareness going on with these girls.
Yeah.
They just think they're out for it. They're having a laugh. I mean, of course they are. We all want to go out and have a laugh, but the safety isn't there for them.
There's not, certainly, I don't think at the moment, safe places to be. And then the doorman I spoke to was saying when he first did it, there was like 7 people on the door, but to make a cost saving, there are now only 2 people. And really it's there as one, because they've got to have them there, and maybe prevent any fights that will stop people continuing to buy drugs. But the whole motive is to make profit, which obviously every business needs to do that. But there's a different ways and means of doing it. They know bars aren't, coming forward to say there's spiking gone on in the bar because they don't want the reputation being tarnished. So the girls and women aren't, coming forward with it, or they've told the bar and nothing's happened. So it's all about accountability, I think, in some of them issues.
I think you're right in just what you just said there, Kate. The bouncers are there to stop the fight, aren't they? Ultimately, that's what the bouncers seem to be there for, not safety. You know, they're just not. I mean, when you leave a nightclub, when I left with this particular individual, absolutely. When I left with her, we just then went to a taxi rank, and the bouncers just, they didn't care that there was girls outside of that nightclub, and they were stood on their own. And it's not a great area where this club is. They didn't care. It's like, once you're out, that's it. It doesn't matter. You're not in our building anymore. And I found that really frightening because I've not been out for so long to a club. I was gobsmacked, really. It's just a lack of security for these young girls.
Yeah, and it does thingy then, doesn't it? Where is safe? And that's one of our projects that we always say. Yeah, we always say that what we do, no matter what, and I'm sure yours is the same in your charity, that we really promote that. If nothing else, we provide a safe place for them to come. And for some people, adults and young people, there isn't many of them, and I think that's really sad now. Because that just impacts them in so many other ways. And like you said, it goes back to like they'll probably self-harm because of the lack of control they've got and everything else going on in their life. So when you unpick safety, there's lots of facets to it, but everybody's ultimately responsible. I think that we're very much, and I think we've come out of COVID a little bit like this. It's not my issue, it's somebody else's. Because I think we're all forgetting what our responsibilities can be.
There certainly needs to be more accountability on some of these sort of nighttime establishments for sure, because I think you're absolutely right. When sort of women and people generally are leaving these buildings, they're sort of being left to fend for themselves, and that's not necessarily acceptable. They should be making sure that a legitimate lift is there to obviously get these people home. But then even when obviously it comes to that journey home, it's not always safe, is it? I mean, we don't know who some of these women are getting into sort of taxis with, for instance, and the way that sort of that industry is regulated is also incredibly important, because there are some real discrepancies there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the bill is going through at the moment. This is a big bugbear of mine because I am a single woman quite recently, so I am getting taxis on my own. And again, it's really opened my eyes to the safety of getting into a car with someone you've never met. They're taking you home, so they know where you live. Ultimately, they probably know then that you live on your own. And that's really frightened me, which it never did before. It didn't bother me before, but it does now because I am on my own. And there's no there's a bit of regulation, but it's not in law. So they don't have to be DBS in law. They're supposed to do it, obviously, but it's not law. If they get struck off, a taxi rank, taxi driver or private hire, if they get struck off in one authority, to say they get struck off in Cheshire East, they can then go to the Wirral and apply again, and there's no checks made. I mean, you couldn't do that with anything else. You're a lone driver picking up people, whether it be male or female. You are a lone driver, but then you can get your license then over in the Wirral, but you can then come back to Cheshire East and drive. I mean, I just don't understand how that can happen. I really don't. But there is a bill going through. It's halfway through, so let's hope it does get passed. But then the whole, they've got to set up all those systems, haven't they, of data sharing from one authority to another. Yeah. If you get your taxi license, how's that going to work? I mean, I've been in a car where he's not been the actual taxi driver. They have they're supposed to have the face on show on the license. It's not even been that. It's obviously someone's brother or someone's friend that's driving that taxi for that night. Yeah.
And some taxi drivers will say no if it's, a journey that they don't think's worth their while, but then to expect, anybody on their own to walk home at a certain time of an evening, and when I've been exploring some of this in terms of the doormen and the taxis and everything, unfortunately, goes back to cost saving, and I think that's really, really sad that we've lost that. And I do think
that's what worries me, Kate, that if they pass this bill, it's going to cost a fortune, to get some kind of database that can be shared. So, it might get passed, but then the infrastructure to actually do it, are they going to be able to do that?
Yeah.
And who monitors that? I mean, that's the whole thing. Who is going to monitor it?
Yeah.
But like you've just said, and you're dead right, if I was to get in a taxi because it was only half a mile away to my house, but there's no way I'm going to walk on my own, you're dead right. A lot of drivers wouldn't do it.
Yeah. I mean, I live right by the train station.
It's only half a mile.
Yeah, and that's what I've had that, definitely, that he's refused to take because I come out the train station. I live down the other end of the road, but actually I would have to go past about 8 pubs to get home on my own at a certain time of the night. So, and it's almost like we're willing in society to allow, the real worst case scenarios, we're allowing for people to be killed because nobody wants to pick up the cost or, like you say, put the infrastructure in and administer it. And that's terrible.
Yeah.
It is kicking the can down the road, as so to speak, is having dire consequences for the safety of people, especially women. And now that we've sort of come out of COVID, we are seeing this sort of issue with accountability, as you've talked about. Nobody's really taking responsibility. So over the sort of next few months, just before we sort of wrap up on the programme today, because I'm conscious that we are starting to run short of time, what should the priority be, obviously from yourselves, but also from a legislative point of view, over the next few months to try and really change the landscape for women's safety? Because this needs to be addressed on a multitude of fronts.
I think
over to you, Kate.
I think it is going with that zero tolerance, but it needs to be done from an extremely high level. So we know that they commissioned the Metropolitan Police, and I think that's been a stamp. For me, it's very unfortunate. I feel my personal opinion on that is what a shame it was a woman that couldn't roll this out and affirm her leadership on it. But also, that the government needs to look at this. It's not hard. We're unpicking it. Local level, grassroots charity are unpicking this. Somebody could roll with this and make it their issue for the year and stamp out and, work with the big players like your Instagram and your social media and Facebook, things like that. But I think, as we've said, ultimately everybody can have an option in playing an influence in this, challenging the norms, challenging what people are saying. We're in a whole different world than what we were 20 years ago, as I said before. So what's acceptable then is not acceptable now, and we do have to challenge that. We do challenge it in many other ways, in the LGBTQ. I know they've got a long way to go, but we do challenge it. We say it's not acceptable, but for some reason, we do a huge celebration for International Women's Day in our charity, but people still wonder about it. What's that about? Yet we have massive prides in all the cities. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I'm saying all these should still be celebrated on equal measures, and we should still challenge this on equal measures as well. But that's an individual thing. And I think, schools do need to do this work. I think it's a shame for them. But then, some schools aren't doing it appropriately, so they would, need to.
But again, that all takes money, Kate, doesn't it?
Yeah. One of our committees, we're looking at, women in sport is one of our other committees, and how PE is rolled out in some schools is quite still very gender focused, very, not with modern times, and that's just an example, perhaps, of where things do need to be updated for it.
Yeah.
Needs to be a period of significant change over the next few months, doesn't it? And it's going to be very, very fascinating to see whether or not that transpires as it should do. And as we do start to see how the situation unfolds and what is being done about it, if anything, and I sincerely hope that there is, I'd certainly relish the opportunity to welcome you both back onto the show just to reassess the situation at that point in time, because this is such an important issue and we really, really, really do need to see the action that it warrants.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully there is some update.
Let's just keep our fingers crossed on that. And in the meantime, of course, both of you, I hope that the Women's Action Group really does continue to keep up that incredible work that you're doing, because it's for such an important cause. And by all means, thank you both for taking the time.
Kate bringing that together.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you both of you as well for taking the time to come and talk about this incredibly important issue with us here at the Leaders Council today. It's been an immense pleasure having both of you on the show, and by all means, do take care and stay safe with everything that is going on in the world at the moment, moving forward. And hopefully we'll touch base again very soon.
Oh, thank you.
It was an immense pleasure for me to welcome Cheryl Simpson MBE and Kate Blackmore onto today's programme. And I do hope that everybody thoroughly enjoyed the interview discussing such an important social issue of our times. For anybody tuning in to the programme today who may feel that you have your own story of importance to share with us here at the Leaders Council, then by all means do reach out to us and apply to be on the show at leaderscouncil.co.uk/apply, because we would absolutely love to hear from you. And until next time, to all of our regular listeners, take care, stay safe, and goodbye.